Good afternoon, everyone. And today the webinar is all about mastering the franchise operations manual. And we're very fortunate to have Kit Vinson with us from FranMan. Many of you probably know Kit, and we've had a great conversation. Kit's put together some great materials with us, and today's all about understanding the operations manual, mastering it. And whether you're a startup franchisor, emerging franchisor, international brand, I know there's going to be some great value today in the webinar. Kit, thanks for doing this today.
Oh, man, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. And I'm more excited about my kick-ass T-shirt that I got for being on.
You know why? And if you haven't seen it, Kit did our first official unboxing video. So I think we'll add a link to this webinar to take a look at it. But
who has a box like that? That's the first thing I said when I got it. I said, oh my God, look at this cool box.
Yeah, no, it was, you had our office was pretty excited to see that yesterday.
You have a low threshold for pleasure at your office, apparently.
For those that don't know Kit is one of the co-founders of FranMan. They don't just specialize in operations manuals. They specialize in world-class custom franchise operations manuals. I say that kidding around, but not really. FranMan is just dedicated to operations manuals. And, for those that know Kit and in the conversation I've had, they just have some great insights and value for franchisors on that spectrum. The other thing is that Kit has a great podcast, which we were discussing, and really it was interesting because the genesis of what FranMan's doing, what Kit does, it's really about adding value. And I hope everyone on this webinar today is going to get some great value. I know Kit spent a ton of time with their webinar that's going on for quite some time, and it's on franman.net is Kit's website. They could also find the podcast there, right?
You can find links to the podcast. The best way to get to the podcast is through your phone. Most people listen to podcasts over their telephone. And so you can go into any podcast app and do a search for the Franchise Manual Podcast, and it'll show up, and you can download the episodes as they go. We've got about 27 of them so far, and been doing it for about 4 years. I don't do them very frequently like you do. I'll wait until I have the right topic and the right guest. I don't call them guests because I'm from Texas. I call them podners.
That's great. So what does FranMan do? How does it help brands, and what's the company all about?
Well, as the name, the official name of the company used to be Franchise Manuals LLC, and our logo was FranMan. And so when we switched over to Corp, we'd say, you know what, let's call it FranMan Inc. because that's what everybody calls us anyway. So we produce, like you said earlier, custom world-class franchise operations manuals. So it's a really big document. It's got a lot of functions to it. And so when we say world-class, we mean that. This is one that you can take anywhere and put next to anybody's manual and be very proud of what you have, because it's going to perform that function. So we specialize. We are a specialist in franchise operations manual. We survive in a very narrow niche in that market, which is producing franchise operations manuals.
What I think is really unique, Kit, that what you guys do, and from our conversation, for franchisors, as a franchise lawyer, the one thing I see is if it's a startup franchisor, they don't fully understand the concept of the franchise operations manual's value. They may understand it's needed. And then emerging and even more mature franchise brands, they sometimes neglect, or they stop paying attention to brand. And when you say custom and world-class, what I find interesting, and we'll discuss it later in some of the slides, is I think you guys have really created a product line. I know you have 3 offerings for 3 different levels that really matches the needs of franchise brands. And the reason I bring it up now is because from my perspective as a lawyer, and we work with emerging brands throughout the country, the operations manual becomes a mystery. And my big concern for our brands is that there's too much noise in the industry. They end up with a pile of paper or digital, all these documents that don't work together. And so as we go through this, I know the value of what we've been discussing. It's definitely something I want to dive deeper into. But I guess my only critique is when you say custom world class, I happen to think it's a lot more. after speaking with you, because to me, you provide education into the integrity of the process. And for everyone listening to the webinar, I really want them to understand that and really get that as we go along.
Sure. We've been exposed to a lot of different operating systems, both franchise, licensing, and not. And we do bring that to the table. So it is more than just production. But when we talk about the word custom, everybody says there's custom this and custom that. When you look at an operating system of a basement waterproofing company versus the operating system of, and I'm trying to pick two that we've done that are way far separate from each other, recreational vehicle timeshare or indoor skydiving, you're not going to be able to take a template and create that operating system, that franchise operations manual for those three concepts. There's always content in common that is common to all manuals, and some introductory stuff. But when you get to not duplicating, but creating a reflection of that operating system in a document, it's very different. So they are very customized. There's nothing cookie cutter about them.
Well, and then I think the first takeaway from our conversation for me is that brands need to look at it as part of their operating system or a reflection. And Kit, as we go into this, I mean, in terms of the franchise world, which I think this is interesting. And I mean, because again, there's not too many companies that do what you do. How did you get involved in this space?
My brother is a franchise attorney like you are. And
Right.
One day I was talking to him and I said, boy, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm trying to find somebody that can produce this ops manual for my client. And they're hard. I can't find anybody. I said, really? Because I had written operating manuals for some startup companies I'd worked for in the past. And I said, why don't you do that? He goes, I don't have the bandwidth. I got too many clients. I got registrations coming up, and I don't have the bandwidth to write manuals. And no one's going to want to pay me my hourly rate to write a manual. And I said, well, what are they going for these days? And this is back in 2005. And he said, well, about $20,000 to $25,000. I said, holy cow. There's a need right there for, if you can't find someone to do that job, I said, I can be that person. So let's do it. And we ran with it, and we haven't looked back since.
I mean, you do ops manuals for the very startup franchisors to, I mean, international well-known brands, correct?
Mm-hmm. So we don't specialize in any industry at all, nor do we specialize in size of a company. So what we learned early on is that, one, the bigger the company is, the less they have their ducks in a row. And two is that we don't need to be the expert in any industry in order to produce their manual. What we need it to be is in front of that expert. And if I can be in front of that expert, then I know which questions to ask in order to extract the information that we need to produce that custom franchise operations manual. So that opens up the entire spectrum of industry to us. So literally what I said earlier, I was not kidding when I said basement waterproofing, recreational vehicle timeshare, indoor skydiving, every pizza place you can think of, big and small, from Radio Shack, Panda Express, all the way down to the small mom and pop. Some of them not even in business anymore, but we know how to work with both sizes, because it is a different process. Working with a mega company, with a large company, with mountains of existing content, what we call legacy documents, that's a very different process than it is walking in to a mom and pop and saying, hey, talk to us about how you do things. Oh, we don't really know. And it makes it a lot easier for us because we can help guide them and help formulate that. Where on larger companies, we're not really helping them create procedures and system standards. More, we are documenting the existing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And so how do you see the operations manual itself and its role, really?
Yeah, this is a really big question. Well, the question's kind of small. The answer's kind of big.
Great.
And it depends on who you ask. If you're asking a cobbler about shoes, he can talk to you all day about it. You're asking right now a manual guy about what is the function of an operations manual. And I will tell you, it has a lot of functions. And the reason I know this is because I've studied it, but the reason I studied it is because we would get in the middle of writing these things and we couldn't get the team on the client side to agree on what needed to be in the operations manual? What content needs to be in it? And I would say, this needs to be in it. No, we don't think so. So I say, you know what? Forget it. Let's just start a list. So I started a list 10 years ago. What are these functions? And if I can get everyone to agree on the functions, then I can get everyone to agree on what goes in the manual, because does it serve that function or not? And so the first function that we came up with is that it is the master document for the system standards. Now, as you know, a system standard is kind of like the rules that you have to follow, the rules that a franchisee has to follow if they want to be a member of the club. Those are what system standards are. The franchise agreement makes probably 20 to 30 references to the ops manual as the master document for the system standards, and so that you don't have to write them all in the franchise agreement. Otherwise, you'd have a 400-page franchise agreement and an ops manual that you couldn't change. So they put everything in this manual, and so they say, this is where we're going to put all of our system standards, so that if you're ever involved in a lawsuit that's a result of these system standards, you've got a place to go to. If there's ever a disagreement as to what the system standards are, you have a place to go to. That's function number one, is master document. And it's important that people understand that, because they'll come back later and say, well, you know what, it's a dust collector, nobody ever reads it. Well, for that function, it doesn't matter if it's a dust collector. You need to maintain that document anyway. You need to make sure it's current, make sure it's solid, whether nobody reads it or not, because for that function, it doesn't have to be read. It just has to be available when you need it, when the judge asks for it, right? So that's the first one. That's the system standards. The next one is it's used as a training document, training/reference document. More so for small franchisors, for startups, than it is for large mature franchise documents. But for a startup franchise, if they have a well-written franchise operations manual, it's going to be a document that they can flip through with a new franchisee and teach them everything that they need to know in order to roll the burrito, in order to make the pizza, in order to make the basement waterproof, whatever the system is. So that type of content is could be very different from system standards. Making a basement waterproof, it may not be a system standard. It may be a system standard what kind of chemical you use on the cement in order to make it to where the water doesn't pass through. It may be not a system standard, but a best practice for them, what type of booty that they need to wear so they don't make the customer's carpet dirty. The system standard is that they wear a booty, for example. But anyway, the content might be different. What is a system standard versus what is a step in rolling the burrito? We want the burrito to look a certain way. How it get there is not necessarily as important in some cases. So being a training document will generate different content in a manual than if it was a system standard. Brand protection. That's the third function. There's not a lot of content. There's not a lot of tools that a franchisor has in order to protect their brand. At the high level, they've got things they've got tools at a high level in the contract, in the franchise agreement. But other than that, everything is in the franchise operations manual. So that kind of content is different too. And then it's a sales tool. And I don't like to use that word sales when we talk about franchising, because the tool itself, I don't like to use the word sales because you can't really sell a license. You grant a license, and I can't buy a driver's license. I can't buy a license to practice law, nor can I buy a franchise. I can sell the idea of being a franchisee, and I want to be able to do that as a franchisor. I want to show these franchisees that I've got a system in place that's a support system, so that after you enter, that we're here and we're going to be with you, and we're going to be with you every step of the way. And here's how we've documented that. And I'm going to use that as a sales tool. It's not the sales tool, but it's a sales tool. So that's kind of a big deal too. And, when you look and you step back from all of those things and you say, okay, these are all the different types of functions of an operating manual, which is going to dictate what type of information we're going to put in there. When you step back and look at it at a deeper level, the operations manual is the brand. It is almost like the manifestation of the brand. What is a brand? Well, a brand is what somebody feels about a particular company. Brand lives here in your head. Brand is represented by things like a logo or a storefront. But when a customer goes into a store and they have an experience, that starts building that brand. Well, that experience is directly derived from the operating system. And the operating system, operations manual is the documentation of that operating system. So your ops manual is your brand. And that's kind of a deeper topic. And did I lose anybody?
So I Kit, that look, a couple of things. When you refer to it as an operating system, that's valuable to me. To me, as a layman or as a franchise lawyer, to me, it's certainly the integration between the legal protections, franchise agreement, that's important. But I think you do take it to another level when you describe it as a reflection of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
I've never looked at it that way. And as you say it makes complete sense to me, right? And I think for franchisors, if you look at brand standards, your brand, whether it's, training, service delivery or product delivery, and look at everything in the ops manual as the reflection of its brand, I think that's a great way of looking at it. I'm curious too, Kit, as you go through the process of preparing an operations manual, do you find that the process itself fosters an environment where they actually start reevaluating their standards and systems?
Oh, that's a great question. We've been doing this for 15 years, and almost from the very beginning, we had franchisors, clients that would, after the site visit, the site visit's 3 days. We spend 3 days there, and we start at the very beginning, and we evaluate their legacy documents. We find out who the content experts are. We create the outline, and then from there, I turn a digital voice recorder on, and we just start talking. And boy, we uncover every single leaf. And we look underneath every rock and behind every corner, and we shine light on areas of their business that they have either intentionally or not intentionally kind of avoided. And we all have those parts of our lives and businesses like, ugh, I don't want to do that. And we get comments regularly from clients that go, oh my gosh, thank God you came and did this, because we uncovered areas, we figured out where we needed to spend a lot more of our efforts in fine tuning our systems and creating standards that didn't even exist yet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, to me, it's, and I see it with our brands and with emerging brands, and like anything else, right? You think you know your business or your systems, even ourselves. And then when you're forced to document certain value propositions and systems, it takes a life of its own and it starts evolving. And I mean, the other thing too is the ops manual it's not static. It's an always evolving document, right?
Absolutely. Boy, it is not, I tell people it's a process. It's not an event.
Yeah.
It is not an event at all. And so,
yeah, Kit, that process is critical, right? So, and that's where sometimes I have a hard time explaining to a startup franchisor or an emerging brand, yeah, you need the ops manual, but that process is critical. And so I feel like if they don't address it the right way, you're shortchanging yourselves and your franchise system.
Yeah, when there are still a lot of franchisors that use paper manuals, that use a 3-ring binder. Believe it or not, there are fewer than there were, but there's still a lot that do it. And I tell them that, and even a PDF, you create a PDF and throw that on your website. That is a snapshot of what your system was that day, that hour, that minute. And you can't just sit on top of that and ride it all the way into shore. You've got to keep changing that as your system grows, as your system changes. And you can do it, once a year. We have clients that do it once a year or once a quarter, and some of them that do it once a month, once a week. But when you wait too long, it becomes a big monster that nobody wants to tackle. But you end up with a system standard out there that is not accurate, that doesn't reflect your operating system. It's very dangerous.
Well, it's interesting too, because I feel like if you pay attention to your ops manual and those systems, that's a sign of better communications with franchisees. And that's a sign that you're probably preventing problems down the line that's going to take up more time and more energy. Mm-hmm. One item that I was asking about, because I was very curious, which was, and you've sort of pushed back on me on this, and I found this very interesting. I think it makes sense.
Uh-oh.
So, right? No, in a good way, because again, we work with startup franchisors, emerging brands, and then larger, more mature companies. And one of the questions I asked you was, does the ops manual serve a different role based on the size of the franchisor? And what I find is, and if you could take us through this, not so much your answer, which makes sense to me now, is I like the way you approach the question where you're basically looking at the 5 different functions of the ops manual, right?
Right.
System standards, brand protection, training, reference document, sales. So if you could just take us through that just briefly, like why
Sure.
there is no difference and what that means to you when you say system standard, authority document, brand protection.
So the system, as a document that is the system standard, the authority document for your system standard, the manual, whether you have 1 location or 100 locations or 1,500 locations, you still need to maintain your operations manual as the authority document for your system standards. It doesn't change that function at all. And the content doesn't change. The system standard is a system standard, and it's not going to change. Your system standards may change over time, but you're still documenting. The fact that you're documenting your system standards, that doesn't change no matter how big you are. As a brand protector, again, your franchise agreement, a lot of thou shalts and thou shalt nots that tells you what you have to do. Doesn't tell you how to do what you have to do. In most cases, it tells you what you have to do. We come back and say, kind of repeat thou shalts, but now here's how to do what you have to do. But as it relates to protecting the brand, things that are going to be in there like trade dress or uniforms and things like that, that's protecting the brand. The franchise agreement is big. Hey, you can't offer anything other than this, but franchisees will figure out ways to get around it. Your ops manual, if it's well written, will kind of fill in those gaps and keep people reined in. So as a brand protector, no matter what your size is, it's going to be that document. One of the functions that it does change depending on what your size is a training document. Startup franchisors are more likely to take that operations manual on day 1 of training and open it up and say, okay, class, page 1, chapter 1, page 1, let's go through this operations manual, because they don't have a training system yet that has legs that can stand on its own. But over time, they'll create a PowerPoint presentation to fill in kind of a gap, and they'll create this and do some hands-on, and pretty soon they're going to have a standalone training program that they will no longer need the ops manual for. There is a danger in that, though. They have to make sure those two things correlate, make sure they jive. But other than that, as you get big, you will probably not use your ops manual as a master document for training. As a reference document, if it's well written and it's maintained, it should be, no matter what size you are, you should go back to it and refer to it and find information that you need, as long as it's accessible, if it's user-friendly. If it's not, people won't use it even though it's there. And then as a sales tool, startups are more likely to use it as a sales tool. You go and let's pick a brand like 7-Eleven. You don't have to tell me, you don't have to sell me on the idea, on the value of being a 7-Eleven franchisee or a McDonald's franchisee or Subway, or pick any name brand, stick it in there, any big brand. I don't need to know that you have a well-developed system of support. I probably know I'm going to make that assumption. But you wouldn't be where you were if it wasn't there. But as a startup, here you are, you're brand new. I'm Boudreaux's Burgers, and you've never heard of Boudreaux's Burgers. I'm trying to sell you on the idea, man, I better show you that I'm organized, that I've got all my ducks in a row, and having a well-produced ops manual is one of those. But like I said, as you get bigger, you don't need that. Is that kind of what I follow what we talked about earlier?
That does make sense. And for those startup brands, that process with the ops manual is also a reflection of those internal systems to support and what they're going to lay out for the franchisees as a platform. So
sure, but just imagine looking at an FDD, and you're looking at 2 companies, and both of them are house painting services, and one of them has a 25-page manual, and they're looking at the FDD only. You can't even see the manual yet. One of them has a 300-page manual, and there are 8 different chapters, and you can see that each chapter has content in it. And that's going to give you a feeling of support. That's going to say, you know what, these guys are there for me, even at that level when you can't even see the manual.
Again, I just like observing the way you look at the manual and how it breaks down. Hey, Kit, I'm
way that
curious,
I look at it.
do you see more and more, I mean, how are, in terms of digital media, the do's and don'ts in terms of social media, digital media, how the franchisor deals with multi-level platforms, do you find that coming more into play in terms of operations manuals?
Multimedia, yes, is ways of distributing and managing the operations manual. Is that what you mean? Or are you talking about?
No, I'm actually talking about franchisors giving franchisees the rules of the road in terms of what they can and can't do on social media, how they can market their franchise location, what type of, because I'm always concerned about how the franchisor maintains control over these platforms.
Okay, absolutely. So we have a service, and I think we're going to talk about it in a little bit. It's called the Online Manual by FranMan, where we create a web platform that is the operations manual. And we can, for our clients, we can update that instantly, and we can send out notifications, and we can track who's looked at the notifications and who's acknowledged that they've read it and things like that. For those type of topics that change so rapidly, social media is a great one. Digital marketing, things like that, where the content could be changing on a monthly basis, not quite, but almost. And you've got to have a way to update your operating system, but not just update it. I can update it and throw it in the middle of a desert and no one's going to know about it. I need to get that notification out to all of the franchisees. And I need to know, not just get it out there, but know that they've looked at it and that they've read it and that they understand it. And so it's a combination of notifications and work with your field reps to make sure that they have that on their punch list when they walk in to say, hey, did you see the updates? Things like that. Is it?
Yeah, no, it does. I was just curious if any hot topics in terms of if you see any franchisors struggling with managing or controlling franchisees using social media and things like that. But
but it's not about, it's nothing that we can help them with on the manual side other than help them update their manual when they see that it needs to be changed. We can help them produce that content, but there's not manual itself, whether it be digital or paper. There's nothing intrinsic there that's going to help that franchisor fix that problem that they're having, because that is.
And now you Kit, you had mentioned about it being a sales tool, and from a legal perspective, probably everyone on the webinar knows that the operations manual itself is confidential. And so a franchisee only knows about a couple of things: the number of pages in the operations manual and the table of contents, and they'll know the initial training schedule. And so one of the questions that has been asked is, and I think it's a good one, shouldn't franchisees have access to the manual given that it may supersede language in the franchise agreement? Charles, when you see, as indicated in the operations manual, don't you believe this is a basis of grounds for deceptive practices? Wouldn't you defend a franchisee wasn't made aware of those items in the operations manual? So then, Kit, the terms of the operations or systems manual can be changed by the franchise agreement. So the point here is it unfair that franchisors could sort of change system procedures through a back door, I guess, through the operations manual?
No, I don't think it's unfair. Now, I'm not the attorney, you are, but I'm going to give you my take on that. Is that fair? Okay. Please. We have an evolving system that has to change with the changing needs of our customers. I am rolling burritos, or I am doing a swim school, or whatever my company is. The needs of my customers evolve over time and they change. And I find more efficient ways to do things. And I find out where we're damaging our brand in some areas because we're doing it this way. We need to change. And we don't learn that. We don't know that from day one. We know that over time with experience. And we need to be able to change our operating system to reflect that, because when when you grant a franchise, and I don't know how we're doing on time. I'm going to go until you tell me to stop. When you grant a franchise to somebody, you are in effect, you're handing them your brand. You're just giving it to them. It's your baby. And you hope that they share the same vision for the direction of the company as you do. But over time, you've got this one line. This is our vision for the direction of the company. And this is franchisee's vision for the direction of the company. Over time, at the very beginning, it's almost the same. Over time, it changes. We have to be able to change ours, and we have to be able to pull them into ours so that they represent our brand. And I can't change the franchise agreement without the agreement of both parties or every 10 years. I'm assuming I have a 10-year re-up, right? So if I'm going to change the franchise agreement, I have to have a negotiation with 100 different people to say, hey, we need to change the way we are the type of chlorine we're using in our pools at our swim school, or the paddle boards that we're using are breaking and got in some girl's eye. We need to change to a brand that doesn't break and flake off. Well, I don't need to have 100 different negotiations on 100 different contracts. I need to be able to change that right now because it's affecting our brand. And to suggest that you can only change things in the operations manual, that would be almost impossible. Not impossible, but almost impossible. And we wouldn't be able to evolve, and we wouldn't be able to meet the needs of our customers. And that's where we all earn money from. A royalty is the franchisees, it's our franchisor's share of the customer's money. We all get money. That's all how we live, but we have to be able to represent and change and evolve. Does that answer the question?
It does answer the question. And I get the person's question. I get the passion behind it. I happen to agree with you, Kit. But I understand the question. And ironically, there's franchise relationship laws that no matter what a franchise agreement says, we'll put some outer boundaries on a franchise agreement. And in those states that don't even have franchise relationship laws, there's judges and laws. But I also think the issue is not an issue if you're dealing with a quality franchisor, right? A quality franchisor. In one of our webinars, I think Joel Labava had said it. The most powerful thing a franchisor could say, or at least consider in the franchise sales process, is that my job as a franchisor is to make you as much money as possible to the franchisee. And so, right. And if you have a competent franchisor with the right intention, I think it works. Ironically, for the person who asked the question, I get it. I totally get it. And if the system, like anything else, has the potential to be abused if you're not dealing with the right franchisor. So Kit, franchisors just starting out, what's some advice you have for them in terms of the operations manual? One, in terms of understanding the process and the task at hand. And then the next slide, in terms of how do they go about taming this? Sure.
So you're not required to have an operations manual in order to franchise your business. You are required to have a franchise agreement and just have an FDD, which includes the disclosure and the agreement, but you don't have to have an ops manual. We don't recommend it to anybody because it doesn't portray the image that you want to, and it's not going to help you succeed. So we say, you should have one. If you want to write your own, you can do that. You can go to franman.net and go to our outline. We have a free outline and you can download it. You can shoot me an email and I'll send you our outline and you can get to work. And I think that's great. If you have the skills, if you have the time, if you have the understanding of franchising, then do it. But you have to understand this is a big elephant. And, the joke is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. And break it up into small pieces. Start with chapters, create your outline, break it up into chapters, break your chapter down into sections, and each section to subsections, and just hit them one at a time. So that's my advice for someone who's going to start writing a manual. And as you get deeper into that, it's like, okay, now how do I do that once I do that? One, it's super important that you know who your audience is. And it seems pretty easy. Hey, our audience is franchisees. But the reality is it's not. It is, but it's not just that. I am. We're writing a manual for a company out of California, a pizza place, and when we got his manual done, he wanted it done fast, and we had the capacity, and we got it done super fast. And he got the manual, and he says, "This is not going to do it all." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Man." He goes, "I can't give this to anybody. This is about how to open up a business bank account. This is about creating a legal entity and an LLC." He goes, "The people I'm talking to," he goes, "these are franchisees of multiple these are big businesses, and if I'm telling them how to what questions they can ask in an interview or what is the labor, I can't include this stuff." So we immediately, one of the first questions we ask now after that client is, tell us about who your intended market is. Who's your intended franchisee? Is it a retired teacher, retired military person who may not have ever done anything in business before? And they want to retire out and they want to cash in a 401k and do all these things. Well, what you tell them, what you're going to include in the operations manual for them is very different than this big businessman or big businesswoman, big business person that has a team of HR people already, that already has a POS system, multiple POS systems. They know how to do all that stuff. Your content is going to be very different. So number one, know who your intended audience is. Start with the outline. They tell you in English class in high school, write your outline. You need to know where you're going. So, when
if I were going to throw something at you, you blurted out like 6 common topic, or what would a typical outline sound like in terms of the?
So typical outline is going to be, you're going to start with your, hey, here's an introduction to our company. Here's who we are. We're going to talk about pre-opening, and pre-opening is a big chapter. Some companies take that out of the manual and make it its own manual. It's and because you're only going to need it once or twice or maybe 3 times, but it's not something you're going to need every day. So they pull it out. We like to keep it in there, but it doesn't matter. We can pull it out, but it's everything that takes place from the time a franchisee signs a contract to the time they open their doors for the first time. As you can imagine, there's a lot of activity that goes on there, and that needs to be included in the manual. Some of them are system standards. Some of them are just, hey, here's how to do it. Let us help you get there faster. So pre-opening is a big chapter. HR is a chapter typically in an operations manual, though these days it's less of a chapter sometimes. So that's what kind of people are we going to need to have? What kind of positions are we going to need to fill? What's a good personality profile of that position? What are these guys going to do? What kind of training? What kind of scheduling are we going to need to do? What's the minimum number of people we need at any given time? Things like that. After HR, you'll get into operations, and operations could be multiple chapters. For any kind of food service, you're going to have not just one operations chapter, operating procedures, but you're going to have front of house. You're going to have back of house. If you've got a drive-through, you might have side of house. You might have a bar. And if that's the case, so your operating chapter will probably be broken up into multiple chapters. Then after that, you've got sales. Some companies you could just replace whatever product it is and say, this is a sales company that happens to sell X, but whatever that is, their sales chapters are the operating chapter in many cases. You'll have a marketing chapter. Here's how you're allowed to use our logo. Here's how we do digital marketing. Here's our social media, things like that. So marketing chapters, we like to put in, additional content, links and that business people need, links to tax law and things like that. So that's a different chapter. Finance and accounting is a chapter in itself. It's like, hey, you know what? Here's how to set up QuickBooks. Here's a chart of accounts that you can use. Here are the reports that we require. This is what we get from our POS system. Things like that. Those are kind of the big buckets.
Okay. That's good, because I'm always asked that question. So we understand the task. Again, your first point, it's so obvious, but it wasn't obvious about knowing your intended audience. And that also applies to Kit, where you have brands that are selling area representative rights or doing master franchises. And so you're onboarding masters and area reps. So we have now an outline, and then the next 3 steps you're recommending.
Well, and I want to just really quick back up and say based on what you just said, if you have master franchisees out there that are going to be duplicating your system in another market, like in another country, that's not the same manual as what we're talking about. We're
Correct.
talking about a unit level operations manual. If you're going to have me duplicate corporate office in another country, that's generating leads for franchisees. That's how we're going to move them through the funnel, how we're going to do discovery day. That's a very different manual. We produce that manual as well, but it's not the same process. It's not the same content, right? Okay. So
Different.
I'm sorry.
No, it's very different, and sometimes that's overlooked, right?
Oh my gosh, it's hard to find. Try to find somebody that produces master franchise manuals. It's hard to do. It's almost impossible. And trying to do the research for us to get us up to speed where we can produce them was hard. It was difficult. So then once you have your outline done and you know kind of what you want your manual to look like, and you know you've figured out who your content experts are within your company. Don't try to do it all yourself. You may switch hats and say, okay, now I'm the marketing guy. But if you have someone in your company that kind of does that for you, if you've gotten to the point where you've specialized, where you've got a separation of responsibilities, probably you're not ready for franchising if you haven't gotten that far yet. But bring those people in. They're the ones with the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are going to help you fill out those sections and subsections. So assign your content experts for all the elements of the manual and use them. Don't just have them there just to be yes man. Get them to help you. Get them to help you develop a section or a subsection, etc. Then that's organizing your legacy documents. Find out what you have. You don't need to recreate the wheel. Most people have content already. Use it. Figure out how you can use it, where it's going to go in your operations manual. And then, like I said, break it up into pieces. And so that you're not trying to eat this whole elephant at one time. So you know what, this week we're just going to do this one piece. And next week we're going to do this next piece. If you say, I'm going to write the manual this month, you are not likely to get done. It's an iceberg dead ahead, and it's going to take you under.
Kit, how long should it take for initial, I'm a new franchisor, initial draft, so I'm ready to go, and I feel confident to hand it to someone?
Yeah, how long is a string?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
No, Kit, by the way, I get it.
It really depends on a lot of things, but I will tell you, I'll give you an answer because nobody likes that answer. It depends. So we get our manuals done and we say, and we always put a big asterisk next to this because I get this question a lot. How long is it going to take you to write our manual? I said, well, 90 days with a big asterisk. And the reason is this: we lose control of the timeline once we deliver a rough draft to a client. I can't force anybody. I'm not going to sit down with you and say, okay, let's read the next line. And here's the reality. The reality is this: every one of our clients has a business, man. They got employees, they got things happening. And here's this operations manual, this task. I need to edit this chapter of the operating manual. And if I do that, then I'm going to have a good operating manual. And if I have a good operating manual, I'm going to have better compliance. If I have better compliance, our customers will be happier. And if they're happier, we're delivering our system standard better, our brand better, then they'll become return customers. Everybody makes more money, and eventually it gets down to royalties. That's a very squiggly line. And it's very difficult to prioritize editing this operating manual when I've got fires I need to put out today that have a direct line from this activity to bottom line profit. So it's really hard for us to be able to say, hey, we can get this manual done in 90 days, because what happens, we'll deliver a rough draft and then we won't hear from somebody for, God, one time, the worst case scenario, it was over a year. And we would get pieces back here and there. And finally they came back. I'm not going to say who it is, but I will tell you, we put a new clause in our contract to protect us from it. But they came back so long later, they said, oh my gosh, this doesn't even apply anymore. We need to rewrite the manual. And you said, here, you're going to write it to our satisfaction. So rewrite our manual. We had to rewrite the manual. So it can be very serious. But you know what? 90, 120 days is when you can expect to get it back from us. If you're doing it internally and you've got so many other things on your plate because you don't specialize in that, it might take you longer.
All right. And it's going to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking out of all this, you guarantee 90 days.
Right.
I actually jumped the gun on this and I asked what
Okay.
topics should be included, and you covered those really well, which then gets to what topics should not be included in the ops manual.
Well, and that's a hard question. For me, it's a
I
hard
mean, what are
question.
things
But
you see
human
if you look at an
resources.
ops manual and you say, why is this here?
Excuse me, just a second. I'm going to take a drink out of my Internicola Law Firm coffee mug. It's not often we see content that's why is this here? It's more often we see content is that's good content, but you shouldn't put it here. Do you understand that difference? That difference. So when we talk about human resource stuff, when I'm writing a manual for my employees, I can make requirements all day long. I can say you have to do this and you have to do that, and if you do this, you will be fired. Boy, can you imagine putting that in a franchise operations manual?
Right.
If your employee does this, you have to fire them. Holy cow. You wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. So human resource chapter is the one where we see the most content that you say, ooh, you just can't really put that in here. You really need to change your language here. And the good news for us is that we've been with this NRLB stuff. Joint employer is the topic what we're talking about. And I don't know if all your listeners know what that is. Maybe you have
No,
enough.
I mean, just generally, I mean, most would probably know, but what Kit's referring to is decisions by the National Labor Relations Board and cases actually involve McDonald's where they've imposed liability on the franchisor for employment violations of the franchisees, meaning as an employee of a franchisee could sue the employer, can sue the franchisor for those violations, right?
And they're considered a joint employer. That's the
Yeah, which is a fiction. It was fabricated. It's just created. Let's just create these legal rights that never existed before. And I mean, ironically, it knocked down a tremendous legal barrier too, which is, hey, my franchisees are independent operators. Their employees are theirs. And so what Kit is referring to is before these decisions came about, and they're very politically generated, you know, franchisors included more about HR guidance for their franchisees, whereas now you don't want that extensive disclosure or extensive involvement in your ops manual because a plaintiff's lawyer who's suing a franchisee could look at that and say the franchisor is a joint employer and I'm suing them. So
see, and that's the difficulty. It makes it really hard because a lot of systems out there, the value of the system is interwoven with their human resources and how that's managed and how labor is managed and things like that. And so, you have to take out a lot of the language, but we will say things like, in our corporate owned locations, this is how we do things. We encourage you to create your own system to achieve the same result. And so you have to reword, you have to be careful. Some of our, I was at the IFA convention last year in Vegas, and a gentleman, and I forgot his name, I apologize, but he was an attorney on the McDonald's team at the time. And, if he was just crispy black fried because he was so overly exposed to all that stuff. When you have a conversation with him, it's like, oh no, you couldn't put any of that stuff in there. You can't put any of that stuff because his question was, what do you include in HR? And I said, well, here's typically what we would include. But he's been so burnt that he would say, don't put the chapter in there at all. And other people will say, yeah, you can put the chapter in there. Just be careful how you do it. And so we've had clients where we've written the manual, we've submitted a rough draft, and the HR chapter was completely removed. And other times they've said, hey, we're in our third lawsuit and we don't want to have any of these topics covered. And I get it. But I think that you can word it right. But I'm not an attorney. I would be very careful.
No, I think what you're saying, and it's sad because it has a counterproductive effect where I have clients call me all the time they want to help a franchisee with an employment matter or with guidance. And from our conversations, they know, and many times we're referring them to third-party management services because we don't want to take on that liability. And
Sure.
I'm also a big fan of a very big disclaimer about the employer-employee relationship in the ops manual. And
Well, but here's the deal with that though. And we do that too. We put in this, it's the very first section in the HR chapter is non-joint employer status. And it says, hey, we're not an employer of your employees. And if you see any of our people doing A, B, C, or D, then report that to us immediately, because that's not what we're supposed to be doing. But that's the reality is this, is you can talk about it all day long, and it has nothing to do, very little to do with what you write in your manual. It has everything to do with what you do when you're on site. So you can write it all day long, but if you go in there and you start reprimanding an employee of your franchisee, and you say, God forbid you were to say you're fired, can you imagine? It doesn't matter what you have in your manual. You can not even have the chapter in your manual, and it's not going to save you there.
it's a difficult topic. So
It is.
I mean, so that's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's sad actually.
I told you that was a hard question. That's the hardest one.
You know what though? I think it's good the way it came up, and I'm glad we talked about. I mean, I feel like I'm glad we talked about the NLRB, and I feel like those issues are changing. They change depending on the politics. But Kit, what are some of the mistakes you see in operations manuals when you look at them?
So we get asked a lot to review operating manuals, and hey, we think our manual is great. Can you just take a look at it? And we're happy to do that. The things that we see people do the most would be things like what we already talked about. A manual that was created for company-owned stores, and they're just using it. They just changed the word, put a franchise operations manual heading on the front cover. Well, you have a lot of requirements that you can make of an employee or of a manager that you cannot make to, or should not make to, a franchisee. So we see a lot of people who have taken their company-owned store documentation and just used it for franchisees, and that's a mistake. The other mistake is people that say, oh, we have a 500-page manual, and I say, okay, great, let me look at it. And we look at it, and I can go and take 600 pages out of support documents, spreadsheets, opening checklists, and things like that. It's like all of this is not manual content. This is content. These are documents that support the manual that you would use. This restroom cleaning checklist is great. You should have it, and it's great that you offer it to them to use, but it's not really manual content in itself. The manual content would be, hey, you need to clean those bathrooms, 3 times a day, and this hour, and make sure you fill out the form, and the form needs to be here, posted, et cetera, et cetera. That's content. The actual form itself is not content. So people that fill up a manual think they have a lot of good stuff when they really don't that's one of the reasons. People that'll take a PowerPoint presentation and just copy and paste it into a manual and say, oh, here's our content. Well, typically a typical PowerPoint presentation is bullet lists. And so I'll see a heading, a chapter, and then a section, and then a subsection heading. And then underneath that subsection is nothing but bullets. And that happens sometimes. We let that slide occasionally, but really you should be converting that, but you're talking about what's in between the lines, what's behind the bullets. If that were a PowerPoint presentation, what would the person be saying other than what's on that bullet list? Because that's kind of what needs to go in the manual in many cases. Another problem would be like multiple authors, especially on larger, more mature companies. They've got, man, we have a manual, and it is a bazillion and 8 pages. And I look at it, and I can tell you who created this piece, or that someone created this part of it, and this part was created by somebody else, and this part was created by somebody else. And so when you get multiple authors, you get multiple writing styles, and it's just not as professional looking, and it doesn't flow as well, and you'll get overlaps where people don't know that someone else wrote about something else in another part of the manual. So multiple authors turns into a patchwork. It's not necessarily a mistake, but it's something that can really make for a cleaner presentation. A big mistake is unqualified authors. It's people that produce content for an operating manual that shouldn't be producing content. Because what happens is this: it's that activity that no one wants to do. and it just keeps getting passed down to the next lowest guy on the totem pole. And actually the totem poles are opposite, but the next guy, the lowest guy down, until it ends up with Tommy in mailroom say, hey, put this together. And this is an extreme example. It's probably never happened, but I will tell you this. We were working with a multinational company. This is years ago, a multinational company that was, and they did training. I'm not going to tell you what for, but that's what they did. And that, so their manuals should have been pretty good. You would think. We found a paragraph in their content that started off with these words. It's like, when. It's like, when you do this, well, that made it into a manual. And then not only that, it made it past somebody reviewing it, saying, okay, that's good. Stick it in there. Man, alive. That's an unqualified author. And that's also no review before publish. You see that. So where you say it's obvious somebody didn't look at this and it's not updating it. When you still see references to floppy disks in manuals, good Lord. I mean, you can tell people just changed the date, the revision date at the bottom of the page. Right. They didn't change the content.
Again, it's the operating system. Now it gets to really, how do you keep it updated? What I like, and I guess it's all going to fold into, well, not fold into, what I found very important was questions I asked you about from a technology standpoint, about maintaining your operations manual, maintaining it as a live document. And my biggest issue being many of the points you're raising, which is if it's not used, it's going to die and it's not going to have that intended benefit. So, Kit, in terms of technology standpoints, I know you guys offer, what do you recommend for franchisors in terms of what type of technology they should be using, whether or not you think it's critical that they maintain their ops manual online? How do you go about all of that?
Yeah. So if you're using a traditional manual, whether it be printed or PDF or whatever, I'm going to compare that to an online or truly web-based operations manual. Because a lot of people say they have an online manual, but they just have a PDF on a document library somewhere, which is good, but it's not the same. So if you're going with PDF or paper manual, you're going to need to, like I said, that's a snapshot of what your operating system was on that day. So you look at the date that it was created, that's what your operating system was that day. You need to come up with a system that's going to help you do it. And, the best system is one that you're going to actually use. So make sure you have a system that's going to work. And the way that we've seen work is to assign portions of the manual to different owners, to different content owners. So the guy who is the IT guy say, hey, you know what? We're going to put you in charge of this IT chapter or the POS content that's in this subsection. And guess what? Every quarter, we're going to have a quarterly meeting and we're going to put it on everybody's calendar. And I'm going to ask you to, before that meeting, review our content, make sure it's up to date. If not, come to that meeting with recommended content change. And that's a great way to keep your manual fresh, to keep the content current. Because if it's not current, the worst thing you want to do is be standing up in front of a judge and having to stand in front of your manual defending it versus your manual being in front of you defending you, right? So you want that manual to be current. That's one system that you can do it, and do it quarterly or do it annually, but do it. That's the deal. Just do it. The best way to do it is to take your manual into a web-based platform where things can be done online in real time and you can make changes as they go and you don't have to do it. And that's kind of leads into the online manual by FranMan. That's what we do. That's one of the services that we offer. So we'll take, I was messing around years ago, I was messing around with Wikipedia and I was just flipping through, and this was during the recession, right? And so the phones, I don't know about you, but our phones kind of dried up. We couldn't get anybody to pick up a phone, much less call us. And we're sitting there, and I talked to a mentor of mine. I say, hey, Bob, what are you doing? He goes, well, the people that are going to come out of this recession are going to be people that are going to take a blank sheet of paper and redefine their company. I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And I'm sitting there with a blank sheet of paper staring out the window going, I don't know what to do. And I'm flipping through Wikipedia, and I'm going, this is cool. I can actually submit something to Wikipedia. And if they approve it, then it's going to go into Wikipedia and the whole world is going to be able to see it. That's cool. And it's just a light bulb went off. It's like, wow, hey, we can do that with manuals. We can marry these two technologies, this operations manual and web-based platform, and we can have a system where franchisees, the users, can actually log in and see the content, and they can suggest changes. And if the franchisor approves it, then they'll update the content and notify all the franchisees, and we can search, we can find everything we need instantly. You know, the big deal that people say, it's like, oh, you know, our manual is a dust collector. It's like, yeah, why is it a dust collector? And the reason it's a dust collector is because we inadvertently teach our franchisees not to use the manual. And people tell me, well, of course, we would never do that. So you certainly do that. When you don't update the manual, they're going to go and they're going to find something and they go, that's not current. I'm going to call corporate office. Next time, I'm not going to spend the 20 minutes look through that manual. I'm just going to call corporate office because I get my answer instantly. So we need to have a system for updating that thing instantly, but a really powerful search tool that's going to allow them to find exactly what they need instantly. And because we need things current these days, we have instant gratification, this need to have things now and not wait for them. But they're the ones with the boots on the floor, on the ground. They need to have that information instantly. So the online manual is that. It's secure. It's a secure website where they username and password, secure servers. When we update, we can track to see who's been in there, who's checked the acknowledgement box that says that they've read those changes, so that we know who we need to spend time with and who we don't. Can we track where they've been? Can I go in and say, hey, this section of the manual has been visited, 250 times. That's management information. Now I can go to that section and look at it. Is it current? Because if 250 people went there in the past week, I want to know, is it current? Because if it's not, we got to change it. If it is, I want to know why they're going there. Maybe we need another training webinar on that topic. So there's management information from an online manual that you'll never get from a PDF or a paper document. And, things like video content, things that you can do with a web page that you can't do in a paper document, like throw in a video. I mean, I can tell you all day about how to roll a burrito and put photos in there. But if I can put a video in there, holy cow, I can convey so much more information so much faster.
Kid, it's just amazing because it becomes a lot more than just an ops manual. And as a franchisor, if you have that live digital document, and like you're saying with video, for your management team, and I love your recommendation about reviewing it quarterly, right? So if you have your strategic planning quarterly, just take a look at the ops manual, but it does bring it to life. And then by seeing it and having it on a digital platform, you could just evaluate your systems and just plug in and keep improving, because, to win at this is years. It's not days and months.
Right.
And I love that process. So in terms of, question about the digital. So if someone were using your digital platform, they're going to start off with their existing ops manual, and then you're going to put it online. Is that how it starts?
Yeah, it doesn't matter who produced the manual. We love to produce manuals. That's what we do for a living, but we don't judge people who have them produce them themselves. We just need to get that manual in a Microsoft Word format, and then we'll take it and we'll convert it to HTML. So we'll convert it to that website so that every page on the website looks just like your page if it was well formatted. In many cases, we make it look better. We can actually improve the look of your manual. And, that takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get that thing up and running, and all the links checked, all the external links, all the internal links, all the documents in the document library, so that you have something that you can now turn on to all your franchisees and now start tracking and start using.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, about tracking the franchisees, enhancing, and again, massive task. And now I could just work on it over time, sort of like a website. Kit, in terms of brands, franchisors that are looking to work with you, I found it compelling. Just what type of levels of service you offer? There's 3 of them?
Yeah, we have 3 of them. And if you look on it, if you were say on a spectrum, on one end of the spectrum, we have the one that's the package that requires the most amount of work from a client. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the package that requires the least amount of work by the client. Which one are we going to do the most heavy lifting on? That's the full service package. And that's the one we started the company on. We didn't have a name for it back then. We do now because we have more packages. But that's the one where we go out and do the site visit. We extract the information. We produce the content. Clients sitting back doing reviews and checking off and sending us content, et cetera. But we do all the heavy lifting on that one. That's called our full service package. 3-day site visit, 90-day turnaround. We have an economic package that's kind of based on that, and it's a little bit further down the spectrum in that we require the client to do a little bit of work on this one. So we're going to cut the site visit, for example, and we're going to create the outline with them online, but from that outline, we're going to send them a questionnaire. Well, now they've got to do something. I don't know, Charles, do you use a questionnaire for new clients to get some information for your?
Yeah, we do. But what I'm finding is when you talk about your full service, it really comes down to that face-to-face, and not even meeting in person, whether it's digital or our development calls together. But yeah.
Right. So, but the face-to-face, the full service package is so much better because we can share all of our experience, all of our exposure with them to help them develop their systems. On this one, we can't. So but they want to save some money. We want to offer another package at a different price point. So we're going to create that questionnaire, send it to them. We're not expecting manual ready content, but we are expecting enough that we can make that. So we're going to take their questionnaire, produce their manual. They get one revision instead of unlimited revisions. And that's about a 65-day turnaround time. And then we have a manual template that's even a lower price point, but it's not a traditional template like you would think. We're going to customize the heck out of it. We're going to do lots of formatting, heavy lifting on it. One-click updated table of contents. We're going to have a logo on every page, color coordinated, all of the sections and subsections to the logo. We're going to put the company name, the system name, which is different from the company name. How do you refer to your franchise locations? How do you refer to your employees? Are they team members? Are they units? Are we going to call these things units? Are we going to call them cafes? We're going to change all that stuff throughout. And then we're going to go through and pass through and kick out all the templated content that doesn't really apply to your industry. For example, if you're managing warehouses with people that are out fixing floors, well, you're not going to need anything about hand washing procedures and spoilage of lettuce and things like that. We're going to kick all that out. So as you're going through your template, you're not wasting time reading stuff that we know you're not going to need anyway. And then we're going to send you that. We're going to give you 3 hours of support so that when you call and you say, hey, we screwed up, we copied and pasted a bunch of crap in there and it messed everything up. Will you fix it? We'll get them fixed and get them back on the road running. So we've got 3 different packages that cover whether you're a do-it-yourselfer or whether you want us to pick up the ball and do all the heavy lifting for you. So that's all that we do. So we've devoted a lot of time into creating packages that work well for people.
I think that's great. And along the way, Kit, I've been asking some of the questions have been popping up. Of course, if anyone has any questions and, following this webinar, naturally we're going to distribute it to everyone. But Kit, I appreciate it. I know it's franman.net. This was so many important questions for me and for our clients. And so I really appreciate it. I appreciate your unboxing. I appreciate your apparel. Kit, I really do appreciate this webinar. I really appreciate the time.
Oh man, thank you for having me on. I really had a blast, and I've got to tell you, this is the most thorough interview I've ever been on. So I appreciate you as well.
Kit, you did a great job. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.